Atrial fibrillation. Many of you have heard it as AF or AFib. It's a debilitating condition where part of your heart is not operating properly. It leads to significant side effects such as stroke and early mortality. And a little bit more bad news is that each of us has about a 30% chance of developing AFib as we age. But there's some good news. We at Native Cardio are working on several treatments for atrial fibrillation to improve your risk. Next slide, please. Our first device treats a condition known as postoperative atrial fibrillation, which occurs in 40% of cardiac surgical patients. Patients going through surgery for coronary artery bypass or valve repair replacement procedures. It will occur while you're still in the hospital within the first 1 to 3 days. If it occurs, next slide please, there's really 3 choices. One is to do nothing. That would be a bad choice, because then you're dealing with the significant risks of atrial fibrillation. Or you can be treated with high energy external defibrillation shocks, or with toxic antiarrhythmic medication. Both of them carry significant clinical risks, but here's what happens. You become a burden to the hospital because you have to stay in the hospital extra days, and those increased costs to the hospital are not reimbursed. Next slide, please. Our solution is a device called the Rhythm Maker, which consists of an external pulse generator and 2 internally implanted temporary lead wires. The external device delivers low energy pulses to the atrium, that part of the heart, to convert atrial fibrillation to normal sinus rhythm. Gets people out of atrial fibrillation sooner and out of the hospital. By doing so, it saves the healthcare system about $2.7 billion. Next slide, please. We've clinically validated our device with studies at the Texas Medical Center, who've also recognized that we are solving a major clinical problem. And we also satisfy all the requirements for the easier 510(k) pathway with the FDA. Next slide, please. This is a $1 billion addressable market. There's over 600,000 cardiovascular surgical procedures in the US every year. Every patient will need our device because you don't know who will develop atrial fibrillation and who you won't. It's supported by pretty good reimbursement, about $50,000 for each cardiovascular surgery. Next slide, please. We look at a significant revenue ramp once we're cleared by the FDA and start commercialization. By contracting to just under 100 hospitals, which really isn't that much, we should be able to generate nearly $50 million in sales revenue annually. Next slide, please. We have a pipeline of products supported by IP. We have future products for treating postoperative atrial fibrillation, as well as products for treating chronic atrial fibrillation. Next slide, please. We've got a highly successful board, scientific advisory board, and management team. This isn't our first rodeo. Next slide, please. We've already accomplished quite a bit that has de-risked the investment, but we're seeking $6 million through an approved convertible note where we've already raised a little bit over $1 million to get us through our FDA clearance and initial commercialization. We're also New Jersey-based, which has some significant investment incentives. Next slide, please. Happy to tell you about those incentives and all about Native Cardio after the session. Thank you for your time.